Hey guys, I got a really good question about somatotypes. Everybody knows what they are, okay? Basically, it's like the skinny guy with no fat but also no muscle, okay? The 90-pound weakling from the old Atlas ads. Then you got like the power lifter, the stereotypical big power lifter or strongman guy who's got a lot of muscle, but he's also got a lot of fat. And then you got the mesomorph. The mesomorph is, of course, the guy where they say he won the genetic lottery because he doesn't have a lot of fat, but he does have a lot of muscle, like the perfect athletic build. Everybody knows what the somatotypes are, but what most people don't know is the guy who came up with it wasn't like an evolutionary biologist or a physiologist or a doctor. He was a psychologist. I think his name was Sheldon. He came up with the concept of physique equals destiny. It basically means that by determining someone's natural body type, you could determine the person's natural temperament. Now, the guy who asked the question on my YouTube channel wanted to know what my take was on that. And he himself said he doesn't believe that it determines your psychology, but he does think that, somatotypes as they're used today in terms of like, some people are naturally built bigger, some people are naturally built less big, endomorphs, the big guys, have like bigger bones, bigger joints. Ectomorphs have naturally frailer bones and frailer joints. So he wanted to know what my take was, and my take is that that's all bullshit, and that none of that exists. Okay, because you could look at it from two different ways. You could look at it that a naturally physically skinny, naturally physically weak guy is naturally mentally weak, not because he's stupid intellectually, but because he just lacks self-confidence, he lacks strength, okay, emotional strength, he lacks self-confidence, he lacks courage, just like he lacks physical strength. You could say that, but you could also say that that is a result of his mental outlook. So the question is somebody skinny and physically weak and therefore mentally weak or emotionally weak, lacks self-confidence, or is it that somebody who lacks self-confidence as a result of that is also physically weak to match? And I believe that's the way it is. I believe everything starts and ends in the mind. I believe that your attitude determines your actions, your habits, including your dietary habits, including your training habits. And I got a couple of examples. Now, there was a guy who was on my YouTube channel, and he was asking me if eating a whole lot of eggs would be too many vitamins, and it would be unhealthy to take in so many vitamins. Now, it never would have occurred to me to ask if eating too many eggs would be too many vitamins and would cause you to have physical problems because of like vitamin poisoning because you ate too many eggs. I would just eat the goddamn eggs. But then again, I'm not an ectomorph, so I'm not scared to eat. Or, the way I see it, because I'm not as scared to eat, I'm not an ectomorph. There are other guys. I remember when I was in the Army, there were a lot of guys that wanted to work out, they wanted to lift weights. They were scared to go to the gym, especially alone. Even with me, they were scared to go to the gym because they didn't think they were big enough. They didn't think they deserved to be in the gym. They were scared to go to the gym with all those, quote, big guys because they themselves were not big. I knew a guy who didn't think that he had any right to lift free weights. He says he had to start off using machines because he was too skinny to use free weights. My answer was, of course, if you're skinny, you've got to use free weights. He didn't see it like that. So I think these guys had ectomorph mentalities that gave them ectomorph bodies. I don't think it was their body changing their minds. I think it was their minds changing their bodies. And yes, you can change that. First of all, the first time I heard of you changing your body type, it was in the book Dinosaur Training, which everybody should read. And I'm going to do a book review on that. But first of all, let me just say, everybody's got to read that book. Changed my life, at least my training life. And the guy who wrote the book talked about a concept he called grow or die. And what he says is basically, if you train hard, your body has two choices, either grow stronger or the muscles will just fall off the bone and you'll die. And your body doesn't want to die, so in general, you'll just eat more and grow stronger. And his example was, let's say you take a city boy, never worked out a day in his life, never done anything physical a day in his life, send him off to the Pacific Northwest to a lumberjack camp. A lumberjack camp that does not use any machines, that does not use any motors, that doesn't use chainsaws. Axes, saws, hammers, wedges, got to carry logs around all goddamn day. And let's say that he had a foreman, a boss, who had a pistol and would shoot his ass if he stopped working. Well, he'd wake up in the morning, he'd be starving. He'd eat a big breakfast, he'd work his ass off all day. He'd be starving at night, eat a massive dinner, fall into his bunk, and get a good night's sleep. Did that for a couple weeks, a couple months. This little skinny city boy would grow through a couple different pairs of pants and a couple different shirt sizes because his legs and his arm and his chest would just get fucking huge from all that work and all that eating and all that sleeping and all that recovery. Fresh air, exercise, and lots of good food. So that's like a little story. That's like a concept of what would happen theoretically. But there's also a guy called Stan Efferding who used to bill himself as the world's strongest bodybuilder because he's a powerlifting champion. He's won records. And he also has an IFBB, International Federation of Bodybuilding, Professional Bodybuilders Pro card. So before Larry Wheels came out, who was bigger, stronger, and more ripped than anybody else, he used to call himself the world's strongest bodybuilder. These days he says Larry Wheels kind of changed the game. But I digress. The point is, Stan Efferding, who does excellent videos, I love watching them. Everybody here needs to watch Fuck Mike O'Hearn. Just look Fuck Mike O'Hearn or Stan Efferding Fuck Mike O'Hearn. Look it up on YouTube. You'll love that video. He did another video about dietary habits where he says where his wife grew up on a Pacific island, how everybody's lives changed, the health changed, the obesity rate changed when American fast food started getting introduced to what used to be a paleo diet. But anyway, what I want to talk about this time is a video there Stan Efferding said that he did not go through puberty when he was a teenager for a long time. What he says is he would not sleep a lot. He'd stay up at night watching TV. He'd stay up at night playing video games. He used to work at a gas station and he would basically eat nachos and that orange oily shit with all kinds of chemicals that used to call cheese but wasn't really cheese. And that's basically what he lived on. Not a lot of sleep, nachos, and that weird oily cheesy chemical crap. So at some point, he actually ended up going to a farm. He actually ended up having to wake up early. He actually ended up having to eat really healthy, clean food, lots of it, go to bed early, and do that consistently. And he says when that happened, a combination of fresh air, exercise, eating lots of good, healthy food, lots of protein, lots of fat, he went through puberty. His hormones changed. And he went from being a scrawny little skinny boy, an ectomorph, to becoming, for a time, the world's strongest bodybuilder. And as a matter of fact, it just so happens that I was skinny fat. I wasn't even on the endomorph to ectomorph scale. I was skinny fat when I was a kid. I was a skinny little bitch. I failed the physical to play high school golf. I was a physics major in college. I was a scrawny little bitch, but when I joined the Army, I went from being 185 pounds of fat, okay, being like an out-of-shape version of Bart Simpson where I had skinny-ass arms but a big-ass gut. And when I left the Army, it just so happens that one of the sergeants in my company met a friend of his right before I left the Army, the same month I left the Army. And he says he was talking to somebody who knew me when I joined the Army. And he said that the guy who knew me when I joined the Army was describing basically Pee Wee Herman. And he says he was trying to describe me, but he was describing a person that sounded more like Rambo. So he's like, what the hell? What happened to you? And I said, sometimes people change. And he said, yeah, I guess you're right. Sometimes people change. And sometimes people change from an ectomorph, like Pee Wee Herman, to a mesomorph, like Rambo. So basically what I'm trying to say is, you can look for an excuse as to why you're skinny, saying, I'm just born like this. Hell, there are people that went on my channel and they said, you're punished by God for the sins of your father. So if your father's fat, because of that, God wants you to be fat and you can't change it. You can't go on a diet, can't do anything. You just gotta be fat and blame it on God. Or you could blame it on somatotypes. Or you could just eat the goddamn eggs and do the goddamn work and determine what your somatotype's gonna be. So anyway, if you guys are really interested in changing your somatotype, I made a video that explains how you can change your diet, your low-carb diet, to increase your testosterone, to decrease your fat, to build muscle and lose fat at the same time. It's a free video. You don't have to pay anything. You don't have to give me your email address. You don't have to do anything. Just click on the link and watch the video and let me know what you think about it. If you're watching this video on Facebook or YouTube, the link's going to be below the video in the description. And if you're watching this on IGTV, just go to my profile, click on the link, and there will be a link to low carb cutting and bulking video seminar. Go ahead, watch the video, and let me know what you think. But until then, don't use somatotype as an excuse. Decide what you want and let the somatotypes just kind of fall as they may.